but for Trump, he's the type of politician that he knows how to say the right thing to the right audience, right? To the Americans, he will say, I am going to be tough on China. I'm going to put tariffs on up the wazoo. And when he's visiting China, he will say, this is a great country. It's great civilization. I'm honored to be here. But by now, people should learn not to take Trump seriously. But despite the rhetoric, I think there will be the brief détente will likely hold for the near term, just for the fact that U.S. empire is now hopelessly quagmire in the West Asia, and they can't afford another distraction at the moment. For China's part, China also would like to stabilize the Sino-American relationship so they can focus on what China plays its greatest part.
精彩集锦里，川普在美须先民面前喊出要对中较硬，要把富加美加到爆表，富深到了中，富行较由立刻干上一副笑，破美中是一大的文明古。这一出密人教人哈秘法和汉台词的表演，恐怕早就不该被俗成什么修省的，捧打爆到底，嘴上越较硬。越可能只是先米算盘打得像，真正到了需要闭里门呆的之后，美帝又被西局嘴拖住，根本没有西里门呆的之后，美帝又被西局嘴拖住，根本没有西里再关闭新的对抗嘴。节目中喊到单刀，中比为什么更希望把精力放在自身方再战？嘎盛屯又如何把中比以台包斩成森战人战新疆人战到美元霸占东南战再到人工智慧和机器人养在这一把对胆专我命看比专战的差距，或古不只在履历，更在于看待世界的方式。
And every time this happens, Trump comes to China, Trump says nice things about China every time. And Xi Jinping goes to the United States, Xi Jinping says nice things about the United States, about the possibility of cooperation. But at the same time, Trump's last visit to Beijing, while Trump was saying what looked like properly diplomatic statements, which you wouldn't expect from Trump, number one, all of the other people in his administration, a lot of Republicans, a lot of other people in the Congress, and some Democrats too, were saying very negative things simultaneously. So, with this happening, what do you expect from President Xi Jinping's visit to the United States? Is this going to change things, or is this just maintaining the tenor?
Well, I think, something that did change with the Trump's visit to China is that there's a brief détente between the Sino-American relationship, partly because the United States is been distracted in the Strait of Hormuz right now. They didn't need another confrontation in East Asia. So I think that part will remain to be true. But on the other hand, we are approaching the November election. And China is a big election issue. It shouldn't be. I mean, there's no reason China should be a domestic American political issue, but it has been for the last 20 years. And so, there will be all kind of politicians doing grandstanding, posturing, being tough on China to try to win votes. And Trump himself probably included. But for Trump, he's the type of politician that he knows how to say the right thing to the right audience, right? To the Americans, he will say, I am going to be tough on China. I'm going to put tariffs on up the wazoo. And when he's visiting China, he will say, this is a great country. It's great civilization. I'm honored to be here. But by now, people should learn not to take Trump seriously. But despite the rhetoric, I think there will be the brief détente will likely hold for the near term, just for the fact that U.S. empire is now hopelessly quagmire in the West Asia, and they can't afford another distraction at the moment. For China's part, China also would like to stabilize the Sino-American relationship so they can focus on what China places greatest priority, which is actually developing China and making sure they can provide the best quality of life for the Chinese citizen going on forward. So I think overall the trajectory is still a positive one. Maybe because I'm a glass half full type of guy, but there will be a lot of insane China threat stories being pumped out by the media. But people just need to understand that's just U.S. elections. So, that's kind of to be expected.
Coming from you, I respect your opinion enormously on this. So if you're optimistic, I'm going to be a little more optimistic too. I have another question though. A couple of weeks ago, people started to point out, hey, there are no U.S. aircraft carriers in East Asia. And some people made the argument, I'm not going to name names, that this was the U.S. kind of moving away from the pivot to Asia. What do you make of those arguments?
Well, nobody expected when Hillary Clinton back in 2012 said, first proposed a pivot to Asia, that United States will be pivoting to Asia, but pivot to West Asia rather than East Asia, right? I mean, because if you think about how the pivot to Asia was framed back then, it was, U.S. has took this wrong turn by investing billions, trillions of dollars in war in Iraq, right? And that 10, 20 years of time that U.S. empire were distracted in West Asia, in Middle East, that allowed China to develop itself and to make itself into a peer competitor to United States. And a lot of the Pentagon folks and a lot of the Washington national security people are freaked out about that because they thought, oh man, we gave China a free pass and now they're almost as powerful as us, and that's why we got to pivot to Asia to contain China. That is the whole idea. Well, guess what? Now United States is quagmiring another Middle East war, and so this is what I keep on telling to people, right? Like, this is U.S. This is U.S. No countries, whatever their relationship with U.S. As U.S. vassal, they cannot compete with the golden boy Israel. Right? I mean, like golden boy Israel will always get the priority. So, forget about Asia, forget about, South Korea, top 10 world economy, 50 million people. Forget about you. We need those THAAD missile interceptors to West Asia to protect Israel. Japan, I know you're worried about China, but sorry, Israel want us to engage in the war against Iran. So USS George Washington has to go. So that's unfortunately how U.S. empire is run right now. But for China, it's a great opportunity. This is again, it's a great opportunity for China to focus on its own internal development, while not inviting further conflict.
I want to talk about you mentioned there's going to be disinformation because of the election, but there's also just general disinformation. For example, let's just talk about Xinjiang as one example of that. There's a forced labor law that the United States is imposing on the Uyghur people and products from that part of the world. I just interviewed a gentleman, Dr. Barry Sotman, a U.S. expert teaching in Hong Kong, who is an expert on Chinese minorities. He wrote a book called Telling Tall Tales, where he debunks all of the claims coming out of Washington. And people like Arnaud Bertrand just produced a very long article about his travels there. I've been there. Lots of people I know have been there. Obviously, none of us are finding any kind of forced labor. So my question is this: China has expanded visa-free access to the world, to like dozens of countries to come to China. Just get on a plane, land in China, go around. You don't need a permit to go to Xinjiang. 300 million, mostly domestic tourists, are going to Xinjiang every year. And meanwhile, the United States has floated restrictions on travel to Xinjiang. They haven't actually implemented that, but they have floated the idea in discussions. What does that tell you about the information environment in the United States?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the whole Xinjiang issue that was being raised by Washington and its allies, it is disingenuous. It's never about. They never care about the actual well-beings of people in Xinjiang. Like the effect of all these restrictions and sanctions, it is to make sure Uyghurs in Xinjiang will not get any employment. Because then they will say that's Uyghur slave labor. We have to cut that out of our supply chain. It's in effect, it's forcing the multinationals or any business that does business with the United States to move their supply chains out of Xinjiang, to remove the Uyghur workforce from their employment. That was by design. But now it's become something more. It becomes a excuse. They weaponize the Xinjiang issue into as a trade war weapon, right? Because right now the real issue is a lot of the U.S. businesses are losing their competitive edge against their Chinese counterparts, and now the Xinjiang issue became a clutch for them. They say, "Oh, okay, it's because it's Chinese product. They probably source the Xinjiang cotton or Xinjiang solar, the polysilicon that used to make the solar panels. So it has to be Uyghur forced labor. That allow us to ban it. To ban it, outright ban it, or put tariff on it. But really, it's a trade protection disguised as a concern for human rights issue. That's what it is. And this combines with the U.S. election cycle, kind of move that issue to the forefront because, U.S. is still going through the process of deindustrialization, which has started, back in the 1970s, way before China was opened up. And the U.S. population are suffering through the hollow out of the U.S. manufacturing base.
回看整期访谈，我们讨论的表面上是中美关系，实际上触及了一个更深层的问题。当一个国家正在崛起，另一个国家又不愿轻易放下既有优势时，世界究竟会走向对抗，还是走向重新寻找平衡？节目一开始，从重庆的战时记忆谈起，那座今天充满活力、灯火通明的城市曾经是中国抗战时期的首都，也曾在漫长岁月里承受持续不断的轰炸。无数普通人躲进山体中的防空洞，在警报声里等待危险过去。那些被重新改造成商场、餐馆和公共空间的防空洞，提醒着我们，城市的繁荣从来不是凭空出现的，和平与发展也从来不是理所当然的。正因为经历过战争、贫困和动荡，中国社会对稳定有着非常现实的理解，发展经济、改善环境、建设交通、提升公共服务，这些看似琐碎的事情，放在普通人的生活里，却直接关系到安全感、尊严感和对未来的信心。访谈中提到，从过去空气污染严重，到后来河流、城市环境和公共设施不断改善，再到移动支付、导航系统、共享单车和公共交通给人带来的便利，这些变化未必能在宏大的国际叙事中占据显眼位置，却构成了一个国家真实的日常体验。这也带出了本期的第一个核心观点：判断一个国家不能只看新闻标题，也不能只看外交口号，更不能把一个社会简单压缩成某种固定标签。一个国家是否在进步，最终还是要回到普通人的生活，去看他们能不能找到工作，能不能安全出行，能不能享受更好的医疗、教育和养老，能不能在城市里拥有更加便利和有秩序的生活。谈到中美关系，节目给出的判断是，双方之间的紧张不会因为一次访问、一次会面或几句友好的外交辞令就彻底消失，但在某些阶段，现实利益又会迫使双方暂时降温。美国需要处理其他地区的冲突，也需要面对国内经济和选举政治的压力。中国则希望集中精力推动自身发展，避免把资源消耗在不必要的冲突之中。所以短期缓和可能出现，长期竞争却仍然存在。这里最值得我们警惕的是国内政治如何影响国际议题。当中国被不断塑造成选举中的主要对手，强硬表态就很容易成为争取选票的工具。关税、制裁和所谓的经济脱钩听起来像是在惩罚竞争者，但最后往往也会抬高本国企业的成本，伤害消费者，并让本国供应链变得更加脆弱。新疆议题在访谈中就是一个典型例子。 节目嘉宾认为，一些人权指控可能被包装成贸易壁垒，成为限制中国产品、保护本国企业的政治工具。对于这类复杂问题，我们既不能只听某一方的宣传，也不能因为反感某种政治立场就拒绝核实所有事实。真正负责任的做法是区分事实、证据、推测和政治叙事。看看政策最后究竟帮助了谁，又让哪些普通人承担了代价。同样的逻辑也适用于美国制造业衰退的问题。许多美国工人失去了过去那种高中毕业后就能进入工厂，凭工资养家买房的机会，这背后涉及资本逐利、产业外移、工会衰弱和经济结构变化。把所有问题都归咎于中国，当然比改革自身制度容易得多，但容易的解释不一定是真正的答案。一个国家如果不愿意面对自身的结构性矛盾，只是一味寻找外部替罪羊，那么社会焦虑不仅不会消失，还可能被进一步放大。节目还谈到了一个重要的思维差异。美国部分战略界人士习惯用自身历史经验去推测中国，他们认为一个国家变得强大之后，就一定会寻求全球军事扩张，建立遍布世界的基地，并试图取代既有霸权。但访谈嘉宾认为，中国当前更重视内部发展、区域稳定和贸易往来，并不等于中国没有自身利益，也不代表所有政策都不会引发争议，而是说明不同国家的历史经验、发展阶段和安全观念未必能够用同一套模板解释。东南亚的处境尤其能够说明这一点。许多东南亚国家并不愿意在中美之间被迫选边，而是希望与各方保持经贸联系，争取最大的自主空间。中国是该地区重要的贸易伙伴和投资来源，美国则在安全、金融和科技领域拥有长期影响力。对这些国家来说，真正重要的不是替谁站队，而是能否在大国竞争中保护自己的发展机会。谁能够提供市场、资金属和稳定环境，谁就更容易获得实际合作。美元问题也反映了世界秩序正在发生变化。美元的优势不仅来自经济规模，也来自长期形成的贸易体系、金融网络和制度惯性。但当金融工具越来越多地被用于制裁，其他国家就会重新思考，如果一种货币的使用资格可能随时被取消，那么它是否仍然足够安全？去美元化不会在一夜之间完成，人民币也未必会立刻成为全球储备货币，但更多国家尝试使用本币结算，扩大多边合作，建立替代支付渠道。这些变化本身就说明单一货币主导世界的时代正在受到挑战。人才流动同样如此，华裔科学家和专业人士会到中国，并不只是因为某一个政府、某一位政治人物或者某一项政策，中国经济发展带来新的机会。美国社会的身份审查和政治猜疑也让部分人才感到不安。一个国家如果把来自某个族裔的科学家普遍视为潜在威胁，最终损失的可能不只是几个人才，而是整个社会的创新能力和开放形象。真正强大的国家应当能够让不同背景的人凭借能力获得信任，而不是让他们不断证明自己没有罪。台湾、南海和欧洲议题则共同指向另一个现实，普通民众最关心的往往不是大国口号，而是收入、就业、食品安全、住房、能源和下一代的未来。媒体喜欢讲宏大叙事，政客喜欢讲敌我对立，但民众最终还是会用自己的生活感受来判断政策是否有效。所谓安全，如果不能转化为更稳定的生活；所谓繁荣，如果不能让多数人真正受益，那么这些口号迟早会失去说服力。至于机器人和人工智能，节目展现了中美之间不同的社会想象。在美国，人们担心人工智能被大型企业掌控，担心技术加剧财富集中，担心普通人变成算法和资本的工具。在中国，许多人则更容易把人工智能、机器人和高端制造看成提升生产力、推动现代化的机会。两种态度背后都有各自的历史和现实原因。技术本身并不会自动决定未来，真正决定未来的是谁掌握技术，谁从中受益，以及社会能否建立有效的监管和公平分配机制。所以本期最重要的启示也许不是简单判断谁赢谁输，而是学会穿透叙事，看见利益结构，穿透口号，看见普通人的生活，穿透情绪，看见历史和现实的复杂联系。中美关系不会因为几次会谈就恢复到过去，也不会因为几轮制裁就彻底脱钩。未来更可能是一边竞争，一边交易，一边交易防范，一边彼此依赖。世界也不会只剩下一个声音，越来越多国家会根据自身利益寻找属于自己的道路。 对我们每个人来说，面对国际新闻，最需要的不是盲目站队，而是保留判断力。可以有立场，但不能放弃事实；可以表达情绪，但不能让情绪代替思考；可以关注大国博弈，但也别忘了，真正承受战争、制裁和经济动荡后果的，往往是那些没有决定权的普通人。本期内容就分享到这里。你怎么看中美竞争、美元变化、人才回流以及人工智能带来的未来机会？欢迎把你的观点写在评论区，也欢迎点赞订阅，继续观看更多精彩视频。